Assalamu alaikum. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shayk Yaha. I sometimes go by Shayk Yaha in Baltimore because I'm proud of where I'm from. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And I was invited here to give a lesson to the Muslims of Memphis. MashaAllah. Real proud to be here. Well, let's get started. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who has no volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our unrivaled noble master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. Ameen. It's mentioned in a hadith narrated by Tirmidhi and also by Al-Hakim, a Sahih hadith, that our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna Allah amaddakum bi salatin khairin lakum min humurin na'am, wa hiya al-witr." This hadith, it means that Allah has given you a prayer which is better for you than red camels. And that prayer is al-Witr. Some of you have probably figured out from this hadith that red camels were especially valuable at that time. It was the most valuable of all the types of camels. And the majority of the wealth that the Arabs had at that time were in the form of camels. So basically they're saying it's better than the best kind of wealth that you know. Right? And what prayer did he say is better than the best kind of wealth that you know? He said, al-Witr. All of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the 5 obligatory prayers that we pray every day. Subh, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. I want to talk to you tonight about the prayer of Witr because it is extremely important. It is extremely important. Actually, this prayer, some of the scholars said that it's an obligation. Okay, generally speaking, we teach the Shafi'i understanding of how Islam works and how it's to be followed. And Imam al-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on him, his understanding was such that the Witr prayer is something that's highly encouraged, but it's not something that's an obligation. But there are other scholars, like the famous scholar Abu Hanifa, may Allah have mercy on him, who said that Witr is an obligation, that you're sinful if you leave it out. So just to give you an idea of how important this prayer is, some of the scholars even said it's obligatory to do. Okay, but we don't say it's an obligation. We say it's your choice. If you want to pray it, you pray it. Okay? If you don't want to pray it, you don't have to pray it. But just know that our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of all the creation, what did he say about this prayer? He said it's better for you than red camels. All right? It means it's better for you than whatever else you might have going on in your life. Okay? So pray it. It's a quick prayer. Or it can be a long prayer. Depends on how you want to pray it. So that's what we're talking about tonight. This Witr prayer, like most other prayers, it has a specific time. It has a time when you can start praying it, and it has a time after which the time is ending. So the time for the Witr prayer begins whenever you have finished the Isha prayer. So once you finish praying Isha, it's now time for Witr. And the time for Witr extends until Fajr time comes in. Okay, so you can pray Witr at any time between Salat al-Isha and Witr. Is that clear? Is that understood? Because some of you who think hard about this might be arriving at a question in your mind right now. So what if I'm traveling and I pray Isha during Maghrib time? Because you can do that when you're a traveler. Can you pray Witr in Maghrib time in that case? The answer is yes, you can. Okay, the time for Witr begins whenever you finish praying Isha. Even if that Isha prayer is done during Maghrib time, because you have an excuse that allows you to do that, like traveling. The time for Witr begins when Isha is over. It extends until Fajr comes in. And you're allowed to make up the prayer if you miss it. And there's no limit on how much time you have to make it up. So if you wanted to wake up and pray Witr at the end of the night, and it's better to pray Witr during the later part of the night, okay, that's the best time to pray it. But if you wanted to wake up towards the end of the night, but you didn't, you woke up and it was already Fajr time, you can pray Witr in Fajr time. Okay, the time has already gone out, but it's a makeup now. It's a makeup of a prayer that you miss. Okay, just like you can miss obligatory prayers, you can miss optional prayers, and you can still make them up. You can make them up even years later. Okay, if you want right now, you can go home and pray 10 years worth of missed Witrs if you want to do that. You'll get a lot of reward for it, inshallah. I'm not encouraging you to do that. I'm just saying you can. Okay, what I'm encouraging you to do is to pray Witr starting tonight. If you don't do it already, start tonight. All right, it's a very simple prayer. How many rak'ahs is Witr? How many rak'ahs? Okay, well, this word Witr in Arabic, it means odd. It means odd. Okay? You all know the difference between odd numbers and even numbers? Okay? The Witr prayer has to be an odd number of rak'ahs. What that means is that it can be 11 rak'ahs. It can be 9 rak'ahs. It can be 7 rak'ahs. It can be 5 rak'ahs. It can be 3 rak'ahs. It could even be 1 rak'ah. Okay? So even if you're feeling lazy and you don't really want to get up and pray, just pray 1 rak'ah. Okay? Even when you're lazy, you can gather the strength to pray 1 rak'ah. All right? Get the prayer in, because it's better for you than red candles. Okay? Do the prayer. Okay? But how do you do it? How exactly do you pray 11 rak'ahs? Okay? Well, the answer is you pray the rak'ahs just like any other rak'ah that you pray. Okay? Just like you would pray 2 rak'ahs before Dhuhr. Okay? But you keep going. After you do 2 rak'ahs, you do a 3rd one, then a 4th one, then a 5th one, then a 6th one, etc. until you get to the number that you want. All right? 11 is the most that it can be. Don't go beyond 11. Okay, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in a hadith narrated by Daraqutni, he said, "Awtimu bi khamsin aw sab'in aw tis'in aw 11. فلو زاد عليها لم يصح وتره." He said in this hadith, pray witr by praying 5 rak'ahs, or 7 rak'ahs, or 9 rak'ahs, or 11 rak'ahs. But if you go beyond 11, then your witr is not valid. Okay, so 11 is the maximum number. It's an odd number of rak'ahs, but not more than 11. Okay? And what's the shortest number? What's the lowest number of rak'ahs that it can be? 1. Because our Prophet said in the hadith narrated by Abu Dawood, he said, "Man ahabba an yutira bi khamsin falyaf'al, wa man ahabba an yutira bi thalathin falyaf'al, wa man ahabba an yutira bi wahidatin falyaf'al." This means that if a person wants to pray witr 5 rak'ahs, then let him do it. If he wants to pray witr 3 rak'ahs, then let him do it. If he wants to pray witr 1 rak'ah, then let him do it. Okay, so our Prophet ﷺ confirmed that 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 are all valid. Okay, but don't go more than 11. The scholars also say that 1 rak'ah, while it's valid to pray 1 rak'ah. Okay, it's valid. It's a valid witr and it gets reward. Okay, it's not makruh the way some books tell it. Okay, you get reward and it's valid to pray 1 rak'ah. But the scholars say that the smallest number of rak'ahs that's considered to be perfection for witr is 3. Okay, so if you do 1, you're doing something that the scholars call khilaf al-awla. You're doing something in not the best way if you just do 1 rak'ah. Okay, so try to pray 3 or more. But like I said, if you're feeling lazy, it's no problem if you only do 1. Okay, it's no problem if you only do 1. So you have choices in this prayer. Okay, your choices are not only the number of rak'ahs. All right, you have a choice in number of rak'ahs, right? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. You also have a choice in the number of tashahhuds that you do when you pray al-Witr. You have a choice in the number of tashahhuds. If you want to pray Witr with 1 tashahhud, you can do that. That means you just pray like 11 rak'ahs, and then at the end you say 1 tashahhud before you salam out. You can do that if you want. If you want, you can pray Witr with 2 tashahhuds. That means you say the tashahhud in each one of the last 2 rak'ahs. All right, so that means if you're praying 11 rak'ahs, that you do 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then you say a tashahhud. And then after that, you do the last rak'ah and say another tashahhud. That's how you do 2 tashahhuds. So you have a choice of 1 rak'ah or 2 rak'ahs. I'm sorry, 1 tashahhud or 2 tashahhuds. If you choose to do 1 tashahhud, it has to be in the last rak'ah. And if you choose to do 2 tashahhuds, it has to be in the last 2 rak'ahs. All right? So how many choices did I say we have so far? I said you have 1 choice of how many rak'ahs you do, and you have another choice of how many tashahhuds you do. There's a 3rd choice that you have, which is how many salams you will do. Okay? You know, at the end of the prayer, we say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sit the right way. Sit the right way. Okay? When you pray Witr, you have a choice of how many of these salams that you want to do. Okay? If you want, you can do 1 salam at the end of the last rak'ah to close your prayer. But if you want, you can do 2 salams at the end of the last 2 rak'ahs. Don't touch it. What that means is that if you do it with 2 salams, you're going to actually be breaking your Witr prayer into 2 prayers. Okay, there'll be 1 prayer with an even number of rak'ahs, all the way until the 2nd to last prayer, and then you'll salam out, and then you'll do another prayer after that, which is 1 rak'ah. All right, you can do your Witr like this. And if you do your Witr like this, then your intention when you start the first prayer is that you're praying the introduction to Witr. And your intention when you do the last rak'ah as a separate prayer, you say for that rak'ah that you're intending to pray.
You see what is I'm in.
So you have a number of choices. Move away from the camera. Move away. Over there. Over there. Okay? So you have choices about how many salams you're going to do. It can be 1 salam at the end of the last rak'ah, or 2 salams at the end of the last 2 rak'ahs. And there's a general principle in the Shafi'i school, a general principle, that more is always better. Okay? It's better to do more. All right? It's a general principle. There are exceptions to the rule, as I'll mention in a minute. There are exceptions to this rule. But the general rule is that more is better. Okay? So it's better to pray 11 rak'ahs than it is to pray 9 rak'ahs. All right? And it's better to pray 9 than it is to pray 7. It's better to pray 7 than it is to pray 5. It's better to pray 5 than it is to pray 3. It's better to pray 3 than it is to pray 1. You get the idea, right? More is better when it comes to rak'ahs. And when it comes to tashahhuds, again, more is better. All right, so you'll have more reward in your prayer if you pray with 2 tashahhuds instead of 1. Similarly, you'll have more reward if you do 2 salams instead of 1. So if you break your Witr into 2 prayers, you'll have more reward if you do it that way. Okay, is that clear? The exception to this rule, this general rule that more is better, there is one exception to this rule as it applies to Witr. And that is that if you have made up your mind, that you're only going to pray 3 rak'ahs, 3 rak'ahs I'm talking about. If you've made up your mind that you're only going to pray 3 rak'ahs, and you've made up your mind that you're only going to do 1 salam, okay? You've already decided these things. You're not going to change your mind on it. You've decided it's going to be 3 rak'ahs and 1 salam. Well, in this exact case, it's better to only do 1 tashahhud than to do 2. This is the exception here. Normally, it's better to do more, right? In this case, though, it's better to do 1 tashahhud instead of 2 tashahhuds. Okay, why is that? Because if you do a 3 rak'ah prayer with 2 tashahhuds and 1 salam, it'll look just like Maghrib. Okay, and the Shafi'is, we say it's better if your optional prayer does not resemble an obligatory prayer. Alright, so if you've decided to do 3 rak'ahs and 1 salam, in that case, it's better for you to do only 1 tashahhud. Okay, but it would be better still if you did 2 salams and split it into 2 prayers. Then you'd have 2 tashahhuds and 2 salams, and that would be better still.
2 and 1, right?
2 and then 1. And your intention for the first prayer, the 2 rak'ah prayer, is that you're praying the introduction to Witr. And your intention when you do that last rak'ah is that you're praying Witrs. Okay? I wanted to talk to you about this and encourage you to pray this particular prayer because of how rewardable it is. Okay? Because of what? How rewardable it is. It's a very good habit to get into, and it's very easy. Okay, how many of you know what it takes to become a wali? How many of you even know what a wali is? Okay, a wali. Okay, some people think a wali are like those guys that they can fly and they have powers and stuff like that, you know? And that's not entirely false. Okay, some of the walis of the past, they were able to do extraordinary things. Okay, but I'm not here to talk about walis of the past. I'm here to talk about how you can become a wali yourself. I'm here to talk about how you can become one of these people. And the way to become a wali, it's very simple to understand the path. It's not easy to arrive there by walking the path, but it's easy to understand what this path is. All you have to do is follow all the commandments. Okay? You start by doing all of the obligations, avoiding all of the sins. Okay? But to become a wali, you have to do just a little bit more than that. There has to be at least one thing optional, one thing that's not obligatory, that you do a lot of. Okay, so if you want to become a wali, it starts, sit down, listen. It starts by obeying all of the commandments, meaning you do all of the obligations, and you avoid all of the sins. But you have to add on top of that, okay, because that right there, that's just a requirement for piety, to be pious, is to do the obligations and avoid the sins. But to become a wali, you have to add on top of that you do a lot of extra things. Even if it's just one extra thing that you do a lot, okay, the point is you have to do a lot of extra things. Move away from that camera. So you have to do a lot of extra things to become a wali, and Witr is one of the easiest and most rewardable things that you can do for a person that wants to become a wali. Because, as I said, it can be as simple as 1 rak'ah. Okay? It can be as simple as 1 rak'ah. Among the other things that are good to do in the Witr prayer, in addition to praying more rak'ahs and saying more tashahhuds and saying more salams, there are certain surahs that have been mentioned in the hadith that our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to say when he prayed Witr. Okay, it's mentioned that our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in the third to last rak'ah, we're talking about the last 3 rak'ahs now of Witr. In the first one out of these last 3 rak'ahs, he used to recite Surah Al-A'la. Sabbih isma rabbika al-a'la. Okay, he used to say that surah in the third to last rak'ah. And then in the second to last rak'ah, he would recite Surah Al-Kafirun. Qul ya ayyuha al-kafirun. And then in the last rak'ah of Witr, he would say Surah Al-Ikhlas and Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas. The last three surahs of the Quran, he would say them all in the last rak'ah of Witr. So it's recommended for Muslims in general, when they pray Witr, that they recite these surahs in the last three rak'ahs of Witr. Again, it's not an obligation. Okay, you don't have to say these three. Okay, but these are particularly good ones to say because we know that our Prophet ﷺ chose these surahs to recite in the last three rak'ahs of his Witr prayer. Are there any questions about how to perform the Witr prayer? Yes, bro.
I had a question about you said with the closing salah, if one chose to do the two salams, then the prayer that he's praying with the first salam, his intention, you said, what was the intention for that prayer?
He's praying the introduction to Witr.
Okay.
Yes, bro.
So, for example, if it was 3 rak'ahs, they do 2, and then make Qul Salam, and then do 1 more?
Yes, exactly. Okay, and if possible, you should try to make the Witr prayer the last prayer that you pray during the night. So that means that if you believe that you're going to be able to wake up at the end of the night, you should pray it at the end of the night. Okay? If you are not sure that you're going to wake up during the nighttime, then you can go ahead and pray it before you sleep. Okay? You can start this, the time for this prayer begins as soon as you finish praying Isha. Okay? So that means you can pray it early in the night if you want to. It doesn't have to come late, but it's better if it comes late. Okay? And it's better if it's the last prayer that you pray. Okay? What do I mean, the last prayer that you pray? I mean that some people like to pray extra prayers during the nighttime. We call it Salatul Layl. Salatul Layl is very rewardable. Okay, if you're going to pray Salatul Layl, then you should wait to do your Witr until after you finish Salatul Layl. Okay, some people like to pray Tahajjud, which is also a very rewardable prayer. Tahajjud, it's basically the same thing as Salatul Layl, except that in order for it to be Tahajjud, you had to have slept first. Okay, Tahajjud is when you wake up out of your sleep in order to pray during the night. Okay, Tahajjud is also a very rewardable prayer. And if you're going to pray Tahajjud, it's better if you're Witr, if you save Witr to pray it after you finish Tahajjud. Okay, it's better if you save it until after a Tahajjud. What do you do if you prayed Witr early? Okay, if you prayed Witr early in the night because you were not sure that you were going to wake up, but then you did wake up. You woke up during the night and you decided to pray some extra prayers. You prayed Tahajjud. Should you repeat Al-Witr again just so that it will be the last prayer of the night? The answer is no. The answer is no. You do not repeat Al-Witr after it's been prayed. You don't pray Witr twice in the same night. Okay, so if you prayed it first, early, and then did other night prayers, then it's no problem. Okay, you prayed your Witr, it's valid, and you got the reward for it. But don't do it all over again just because you prayed more. Okay? And don't let the devil whisper in your ear not to pray those extra prayers because, you want Witr to be the last prayer. So if you wake up, don't let the devil try to convince you not to pray extra prayers. Okay? If you wake up with the intention of praying extra prayers, pray those prayers. Don't feel bad that they came after Witr. All right? It was the good thing to do. It was the wise thing to do for you to pray Witr early. Okay? I'm talking now about the person who wasn't sure that he was going to wake up during the night. Okay? If you're not sure that you're going to wake up during the night, it's better if you just pray Witr in the beginning of the night. In fact, in a lot of countries that have a lot of Hanafis, I mentioned earlier that in the Hanafi school, Witr is considered to be an obligation. Okay? And in the Hanafi school also, Witr cannot be less than 3 rak'ahs. Which they prayed all together. They don't split it into 2 and 1. And then in a lot of countries where there are a lot of Hanafis, if you go to the masjid and you pray Al-Isha with them, you'll see that as soon as Isha is over, a lot of people will get up and pray Witr right away. So immediately after Isha is over, they'll pray their 3 rak'ahs of Witr. Okay, why? Because they're not sure if they're going to wake up during the night. You understand? And they don't want to leave out this prayer, which they believe to be an obligation, so they pray it right away. Okay? It's a good habit. Okay? It's a good habit to pray Witr, and if you don't know that you're going to wake up, it's good to make sure you pray it before you sleep, so that you get it in. Any other questions about Witr? Yes, bro.
Where do you pray in the congregation?
Witr can be prayed in congregation, but we only do that during Ramadan. So, during Ramadan, as some of you know, there's this other optional prayer that we like to pray called a Tarawih. Okay? After you finish a Tarawih, you pray a Witr. During Ramadan, it's good to pray a Witr in congregation when you're doing it at the place where you were praying Tarawih in congregation. So if you're praying 20 rak'ahs of Tarawih, for example, it's good for the congregation just to pray 23 rak'ahs, for example. Where did 23 come from? Because Tarawih is 20 rak'ahs, and 3 rak'ahs is the smallest amount of Witr, which is considered perfection. So it's good to just pray 23 rak'ahs in congregation. But when it's not Ramadan, Witr should not be prayed in congregation when it's not Ramadan. Which reminds me of another special thing about Witr, which I didn't intend to talk about tonight, but since you put it in my head, I'll go ahead and say it. The Qunut dua. There's a special dua that maybe some of you know. It's recommended to say it during Subh prayer in the morning. You say, Allahumma hdini fi man hadayt, or in congregation you say, Ihdina fi man hadayt. Maybe you know this dua. It's good to say this dua in Fajr during the Subh prayer every day. Okay, every day. But this same Qunut dua is also recommended to say it in the last rak'ah of Witr, but only in the second half of Ramadan. So if you're in after the 15th of Ramadan, the remainder of the month, it's good to say this Qunut dua in the last rak'ah of your Witr. But it's not sunnah to say it except in the second half of Ramadan. Any other questions about a Witr? Yes, bro.
I have a question about the khushu' in prayer. If, like, you pray in, let's say, Witr, or you pray in Tahajjud, or you pray in Jama'ah, Witr, or if you pray in Ramadan, or like you pray Tatawwa. If you pray in any one of those, but you don't have any khushu' in prayer, so is the prayer still valid with tawab, or has khushu'?
Yeah. Now this is an important question, okay, and it's actually more than one question. So the first question here is about whether a prayer is valid or not. And the second question is about whether the prayer gets rewarded or not. And these are not the same thing. Okay, it's possible for a prayer to be valid, but without reward. Okay? Of course, if the prayer is not valid, then there will never be reward for an invalid prayer. But if the prayer is valid, it might be rewardable or it might be unrewardable. Okay? And the general rule when it comes to salat is that your reward, the amount of reward you get, depends on the amount of khushu' that you have in your heart. What is khushu'? Khushu' is fear of Allah. Okay? But not fear in the sense of like fear of punishment from Allah. That's not the kind of fear we're talking about. We mean that you have extreme reverence for Allah. It's about the amount that you're humbling yourself to Allah. Okay? This is what's meant by khushu'. And the more khushu' you have, the more reward you will get. So if you perform a prayer without any reward, then you will not get, without any khushu', then you will not get any reward for it. Okay? But the prayer is still valid as long as what? As long as you have performed all of the integrals of the prayer and avoided all of the things that invalidate the prayer, then the prayer is valid. Okay? Of course, for an optional prayer, I don't know why a person would seek an optional prayer to be valid without reward, because what's the point? But in the case of the obligatory prayers, it matters a lot. It matters a lot. Even if your obligatory prayer was valid and did not have any reward, it matters that you performed a valid prayer. Okay? Because it means you fulfilled your obligation to pray in the time. right? Even if you didn't get reward for it, you still did the act, right? So it means you did not fall into the haram, the very serious, enormous sin of skipping the prayer. Okay, this is why it's important to have a valid prayer so that you don't skip a prayer. Okay, but of course all of us want reward for it. Okay, we want reward for it. Why? Because what do we do this stuff for? Why do we bother to pray? Why do we bother to make wudu? Why do we bother to do all of these things? We do it so that we'll be successful on the day of judgment, right? Isn't that what we want? Okay. And how does a person get successful on the day of judgment? His deeds are weighed in the scale. His good deeds are put on one side, his bad deeds are put on the other side. We want our good side to be heavier, right? That's what reward is. When we talk about a deed getting more reward, we mean that it's going to be heavy on the side of your good deeds. Okay? You don't benefit from a prayer that has no reward. Okay? I mean, you might have a slight benefit in the sense that you avoided the haram of skipping the prayer, but it's not adding any weight to your pan of good deeds if you got no reward for it. Okay? So try to have khushu'. Okay? When you're in the prayer, think about the one you're praying to. Okay? Think about the greatness of Allah. Okay? This is one of the ways to achieve khushu' in the prayer. Another tried and true method to have khushu' in the prayer is to pray slowly. Is to pray slowly. Don't rush. Okay? The faster you pray, in most cases, your khushu' will be less. Okay? But if you go slowly, and especially if you think about what you're saying in the prayer, think about the meaning of Al-Fatiha, think about the meaning of whatever surah you're reading after Al-Fatiha, think about the meaning of Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, or the meaning of Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. Think about the meaning of these things. When you say them, these are all good ways to have khushu' in your heart. And the more khushu' you have, the more reward you get. Does that answer your question, brother? Any other questions? Okay, good. So in that case, I thought I would just sort of fill up the rest of the time with a little bit of tafsir. So I mentioned that our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to recite Surah Al-A'la and Surah Al-Kafirun and Surah Al-Ikhlas and Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas in the last 3 rak'ahs of his Witr prayer. And I just mentioned that one of the ways to have khushu' in these prayers is to think about the meaning of what you're reciting. So let's take a bit of time and talk about what do these ayahs mean in these surahs. Okay? What do these ayahs mean? If you know these surahs, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Surah Al-A'la. It's a Mekki surah. It means it was revealed before the hijrah to Al-Madinah. It reads as follows. A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Sabbih hisma rabbikal a'la. This ayah, it means clear your Lord of everything that does not befit him. MashaAllah, look at that. Very first ayah, and already it's preparing your heart to do what? To glorify Allah and to understand His greatness, to think about His absolute perfection. First ayah, and already it's preparing your heart for khushu'. Clear him of everything that does not befit him. And some people have said that it means to magnify him in the sense of like glorify him. And the Hafidh al-Abdari, may Allah have mercy on him, he said that Al-A'la, in this verse, Allah is described as Al-A'la. What does that mean? Does it mean that Allah is in the clouds or in a really high place? Of course not. That's not what it means. Okay, when it says Allah is Al-A'la, it means that He has a status which is higher than the status of everything else. No matter how high the status of a thing is, the status of Allah is higher. He's the most high. You understand? But it doesn't mean He's in the highest place. It means He's the most high in status. سَبِّحِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ الْأَعْلَى الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى. الَّذِي خَلَقَ, يعني the one who created everything. فَسَوَّى. What does فَسَوَّى mean? It means that he created these things in such a way that their parts are appropriate for each other. These things have, a person might say balance. Okay, he created the things in a way that their parts fit. فَسَوَّى. وَالَّذِي قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. This means that Allah destined everything. Allah destined everything. So everything that happens in this world happens by the will and destining of Allah. But it doesn't really say qaddara, it says fahada. Okay, so Allah destined everything, but He also guides. And this ayah also, scholars have disagreed about what's meant by destining and guiding. Destining and guiding. Okay. Some scholars, they say what this means is that Allah destined some people for everlasting happiness. He destined some people for paradise, and He guided them towards the actions that lead to paradise. That's what it means when it says Allah created and guided. Others have said that it means that Allah destined and guided. Others have said that it means Allah destined the sustenance that a person gets. Allah destined how much wealth you will have, how much food and drink you will have, whether you'll have work, etc. Allah destined those things, and He guided a person towards the means of acquiring those things. And some other scholars said what's meant by destining and guiding is that Allah destined even the sins. That Allah destined the sins that a person will commit, but Allah also guides some people to repentance from those sins. At any rate, these ayahs, these verses here, they are teaching a person how to revere Allah by thinking about His greatness. MashaAllah. What comes next? وَالَّذِي أَخْرَجَ الْمَرْعَى. This means that Allah is the one that makes the plants grow, the plants that the animals eat, the pastures. Okay, Allah makes those things grow. It continues, فَجَعَلَهُ غُثَاءً أَحْوَى. It means that after making these plants grow, He makes them dry, brittle, such that they may be carried away by a flood, for example. So again, in this we recognize mention of the power of Allah. Okay. The power of Allah, as you know, is limitless. Allah has the power to do whatever He wills. This means that He can make a plant grow, and He can make a plant shrivel. He can make the plant be green and healthy for the animals. He can make it be dry and not healthy for the animals. Allah is able to give life, and Allah is able to give death. Okay. Why? Because His power is perfect. He's not limited to only doing certain types of things and not doing their opposites. Allah is able to do whatever He wills. And this is one example, that He makes the grasses in the pasture grow. And then, after making them green and beautiful and wonderful, He makes them dried up and brown, and sometimes even makes them go away. Like I said, like in a flood. And after these verses of praising Allah, next, it has a specific message for our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Verse number 6 says, سَنُقْرِئُكَ فَلَا تَنْسَى. This means that Allah will teach to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the Quran. And Allah will guarantee that our Prophet does not forget it. This is important because our Prophet ﷺ, in the beginning, when Jibreel would come to him and reveal Quran to him, while Jibreel is reciting Quran to Prophet Muhammad would be trying to recite as well as his way of remembering what he's hearing. He'd hear it from Jibreel and he'd be saying it back with a soft voice, like that. And in this verse here, Allah is saying you don't have to do that. Okay? Allah will make sure that you don't forget it. Okay? Allah has guaranteed that this will be memorized for you, so you don't have to do that. But then the verse continues, إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ, which means except what Allah will. So this means that our Prophet ﷺ will forget the things that Allah wills for him to forget. And what are those things? The things that are abrogated. Okay. You know abrogation, right? Have you heard this word before? Okay. In this religion, sometimes Allah, in this religion, there are cases where Allah commanded us to do something. And then at another point in time, we were commanded to do something different than that. This is called abrogation, okay, where a first command got replaced by a later command. Okay? And when it comes to Quran recitation, this happened for some verses of the Quran, where we were commanded to recite some verses, and then later we were commanded to stop reciting them. We were commanded later to stop reciting them. These ayahs that we were commanded to stop reciting, you won't find them in the Quran today. If you open the book of the Quran, those ayahs are not in there because we were commanded not to recite them anymore. Okay? So when it says here, إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ, except what Allah wills for you to forget, is referring to the verses that Allah abrogated, that Allah told us to stop reciting. That's what it's referring to. Then it says, إِنَّهُ يَعْلَمُ الْجَهْرَ وَمَا يَخْفَى. This means that Allah Ta'ala, He knows what is apparent. He knows what people say and what people do. Okay? But He knows also what is hidden. He knows the deeds, the sayings that people don't see. The ones that are not apparent, Allah knows those as well. The next verse reads, وَنُيَسِّرُكَ لِلْيُسْرَى. This means that Allah will facilitate for our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the pathways of goodness. Okay, it means that He will make it easy for our Prophet to do good things. Okay. And our Prophet definitely used his time to do a lot of good deeds sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some people say that it means that Allah will make Islam easy. Will make Islam easy to follow. And for sure, Islam is easy to follow. By comparison to the Shariahs of the earlier prophets, our Sharia is very easy compared to theirs. Do you know that in some of the earlier Shariahs, if a person got najasa on their clothing, they had to cut that part out of their clothes. But for us, it's enough just to wash it. For them, they couldn't just wash it. They had to cut it out. In some of the past Shariahs, they had to pray just once a day or twice a day. We have to pray 5 times a day. So you might think that that makes it harder for us than it was for them. But no, it's not. Because for us, we're allowed to pray anywhere. We can pray at home. We can pray at the mosque. We can pray at work. We can pray in the field. Whereas for them, they only had 1 or 2 prayers per day, but they could only pray in the designated places for prayer. So it was actually more difficulty for them to pray once or twice every day than it is for us to pray 5 times every day. And there are many examples like this. Okay, things like a tayammum, that if there's no water, that we're allowed to make our purification with dust. Okay, these things, the earlier nations didn't have these rules. So Islam is easy. It is easy. And some of the scholars, they explain this verse by saying, وَنُيَسِّرُكَ لِلْيُسْرَى. It means that Allah will make the path of the Muslims easy. It means it will make Islam easy. قَالَ فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. What this means is that this is a command to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to go to people and you might say preach to them, like challenge them to do better. Speak to them in such a way that will make them leave out the bad that they do and make them become better people. Okay? But it says, إِنَّ فَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. Okay? This means speak to people if speaking to them is going to make a difference. Okay? Some people, they don't listen when you speak to them. And Allah clarifies that in the very next ayah. It says, سَيَذَّكَّرُ مَن يَخْشَى. That the one who fears Allah, he will respond to what you say to him. He will respond by straightening his life. But then it says, وَيَتَجَنَّبُهَا الْأَشْقَى. The kafir, the one who's going to go to hell, he will not apply what you're saying to him. When you encourage him to straighten his life, he will not apply it. He will put it where? On the side and ignore it. Okay? And this is the path of whom? The path of the non-believers, the path of the kafirs, the path of the ones who are destined for where? For hellfire. And then it describes this person. What's it going to be like for them in hellfire? It says, الَّذِي يَصْلَى النَّارَ الْكُبْرَى. This person who avoids the advice of Prophet Muhammad, when he convinces them to do better, the ones who would skip that advice and don't listen to it, says they're going to enter the big fire. Okay? What's the big fire? It's hellfire. Okay? Hellfire is called the big fire, not because it's some kind of great fire that we should all admire and love. No. Okay? It's a great fire because of the severity of the heat, because of the severity of the pain that it will cause. It's greater than the fires of this life, which are small fires that don't have the heat, don't cause the pain that the fire of hellfire will cause. Okay, this does not mean that hellfire, though, is something that we need to respect. It does not mean that hellfire is something that we need to respect. Okay? Some of our brothers, some of you I'm sure have taken from the book the summary. Some of you have maybe learned from the summary that there are certain things that can take a person out of Islam. And one of those things is if you belittle the hellfire. Okay? If you act like the hellfire is not very hot, if you act like the hellfire is not a big deal, if you act like, it's no worse than, a hot day in the summer or something like that, then that's blasphemy. Okay, if you believe like that, then it means you don't believe what our Prophet ﷺ taught, because he taught that hellfire is the worst thing that can happen to a person. All right? So it's blasphemy if you belittle the hellfire, but this does not mean that we have to respect the hellfire. There's a difference. Okay? We fear going to hell, but we don't admire the hell. We don't revere hellfire. We don't look up to it. We don't consider hell to be something that's respectable. Okay? But we do consider it something that you have to acknowledge. We can't belittle it. Okay? We can't act like it's something that's not severe. Because doing that entails rejecting what our Prophet taught. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So it says this person, the ashqa, the kafir who's going to hell, it says he's going to go into the big fire. And then it says, ثُمَّ لَا يَمُوتُ فِيهَا وَلَا يَحْيَا. It means that this kafir, when he goes into the hellfire, it says he will not die in it and he will not live. What in the world does that mean? How can something not be dead and not be alive either? Okay. No, what it means is this person will not die. He will not experience death in hellfire. Okay. This is because part of the torture of hellfire is that you don't get any relief from it. Okay. If that person were to die, then that means he might get a moment's peace from his torture. But this will never happen to the blasphemers in hell. From the moment a non-Muslim enters the hellfire, his torture begins. From that moment, it will never decrease. It will never get less after that. And it will never end. We're talking about a torture where after you've been burning in that hell, drinking your own melted skin for 1,000 years, for 10,000 years, for 10 million years, you're still no closer to the end than you were when you first dropped in there. Because there is no end. This is the hellfire in which the person will not die. This means he will not receive any relief. But then it says that he doesn't live in it either. Okay, this doesn't mean that the person is not alive. No, this person is alive. Okay, the people in hellfire, they are alive. Their bodies are there. Their souls are in their bodies. They are alive, and they feel every bit of the torture that's there. Okay? So why is it that it says that he won't be alive? What it means is that what that person is experiencing is not something that any of us would call living. Okay? We're not saying he doesn't actually have life within him. No, he has life. He's alive. He's feeling the torture. But it's a life that doesn't have even a hint of pleasure. It's horrible in every way, in every possible way. This is why none of us would describe what that person is suffering as life. Okay? But we're not denying that the person is alive. He is alive. And then after talking about what happens to these people, after talking about the kafir and what happens to him, how he's going to hell, Allah then gives words of encouragement to those who want to avoid hell. What does Allah say in the Quran? He says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. This means that the one who purifies himself, that's the person who will be successful. Okay, the winners on the Day of Judgment are the ones who purify themselves. What does that mean, purify themselves? Lots of different sayings from scholars on this one. Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, Ibn Abbas is a big scholar among the Sahaba, and he's one that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a special dua for him to understand the Quran. What did Ibn Abbas say about this verse? He said that it means they purify themselves of shirk. They purify themselves of blasphemy by adhering to La ilaha illallah. These are the ones who will be successful. However, other people, they understood this verse to be talking about zakat. Okay, so some scholars said it means that the ones who pay zakat al-fitr will be successful. Others said that it means the ones who pay the other types of zakat, any type of zakat, are the ones that will be successful. And some scholars, like Al-Hasan al-Bisri, he said that it just means the ones who do a lot of good deeds. Because it says in the Quran, إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. This means that good deeds can wipe out bad deeds. Okay, so according to his explanation, what this verse means is the ones who purify themselves by doing a lot of good deeds, such that those good deeds wipe out their bad deeds. Okay, and this is how they purify themselves. At any rate, for any of these explanations, these are paths towards success on the Day of Judgment. It starts with having the right belief, and then after that, come the good deeds, whether it be any kind of good deeds, or whether it be the specific good deed of zakat. But it doesn't stop there. It says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى, the ones who purify themselves. And then it says, وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى. So who are the ones that will be successful? The ones who purify themselves, but they also, a person might say it means they mention the name of their Lord and they pray. What's meant by mentioning the name of your Lord? It means that, basically it means you have tawheed. When it says mention the name of your Lord, it means that you recognize who your Lord is. And you're adhering to La ilaha illallah in the proper sense of it. Okay? Of course, you know out there are people, they say La ilaha illallah, but they don't really believe it. You know these people. There might even be some of them somewhere in Memphis. They say La ilaha illallah, but they believe Allah is just like us. Okay? They believe that Allah has hands and feet, for example. They believe that Allah speaks Arabic. They believe that Allah is sitting on a big chair or something like that. For these people, they might be saying La ilaha illallah, but they have not understood what La ilaha illallah means. Because La ilaha illallah, among the meanings of it, is that there is nothing that has any similarity to Allah. So if they're saying La ilaha illallah, but at the same time they're saying that there's millions of things that are just like Allah, then they haven't really believed La ilaha illallah. Okay? The ones that we're talking about here, وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ, it means that they understand the meaning of La ilaha illallah, and that's what their heart is attached to. Then it says فَصَلَّى, which means they pray. Which prayers are they talking about? One opinion is that they're talking about the 5 obligatory prayers. Another opinion is that it's talking specifically about the Eid prayers, the prayers that we do on the day of Eid. Okay. And some people say it refers to optional prayers. Okay. That the ones who will be successful are the ones who do optional prayers, of which Witr is an example. MashaAllah. So Allah says, the ones who are destined to hell are the ones who they don't listen when we talk to them about La ilaha illallah. And the ones who will be successful are the ones who cling to La ilaha illallah. But they do extra things. So what's the difference between these two groups? What makes one group choose to not believe and another group choose to believe? What does it say here? It says in the next ayah, بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. This means that a portion of the people, they prefer this life over the next life. They choose this life. They want their pleasure now. They don't want to delay. They don't want to work now and get a reward later. They want to have their fun right now. Okay? And in most cases, the people who make this choice is because they don't really believe that there's a next life afterwards. Because obviously anybody who believes that there is a never-ending paradise full of delight and a never-ending hellfire full of torture, then nobody's going to choose 20 years or 40 years or even 80 years, even 1,000 years of pleasure. No one's going to prefer that over billions and billions of years of torture. Okay, no thinking person would make that choice. So in most cases, the people who choose disbelief, it's because they don't believe that hell is real or they don't believe that the paradise is real. They don't believe there's a life after death. May Allah guide them. Amen. So it says that some people, they will prefer this life over the next life. And then it says, وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. It means, but the hereafter, the next life, is better and more enduring. It lasts longer, right? And that's what I was just saying a moment ago. When you take into account that the next life is better, the delight of paradise is far better than the delights of this life. And the paradise lasts far longer than our lifetimes here last. Then it means it's a no-brainer. Everybody knows which option to choose. Right? We should all work for the next life because the reward is better. It's greater. Which reminds me of something I was told once when I was studying in Yemen. One of the shaykhs there, he was describing what happens when a person in paradise eats from the fruit of paradise. Because you know the fruit of paradise is not like the fruit here. Okay, the fruit we have here, it's yummy, but it goes bad, it spoils. Sometimes it's not even ripe. The fruit of paradise is delicious. It's always perfect. And you don't know what it's going to taste like. You'll grab one, you'll eat it, it'll be delicious. You'll grab the one right next to it that looks just like it, and then be surprised that it tastes different than the one you just ate. You always get a delight. But the food of paradise, it delights your whole body. In this life, when you eat something that's really nice, I don't know, whatever it is you like a cheesecake or, I don't know, a nice cup of grape juice or something. You put it in your mouth and your tongue just kind of lights up with the joy of this taste. Your whole mouth, you feel it. Man, this is delicious. And it makes you happy, right? Isn't it nice when you eat something that's really delicious? But in this life, the only part of our body that really delights in it is our tongue. Our tongue delights in it. That food in paradise, you put that in your mouth, your toes light up with delight. Your whole body delights in the pleasure of the food of paradise. And I'm talking right now about, one grape. So imagine all the other food of paradise. Imagine the birds of paradise. A person in paradise, if he sees a bird flying, he's like, man, I want to eat that. That bird drops immediately right at his feet, cooked and ready to eat. And he eats it and delights in that food. And then when he's done, the bones of that bird get clothed back in flesh and it flies off again. You don't even feel the slightest hint of regret for the animal even. Because there's no regret in paradise. There's nothing. There's no discomfort, no matter how small. MashaAllah. So if someone knows what the paradise is like, why would they choose the delight of this world? These delights that last for a few seconds. Okay? They trade that for billions of years of torture? That's a fool's trade. قال تعالى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى. It means that this thing that we're talking about, this subject that we're talking about, that there is a life after death. Okay? That in order to be successful on the day of judgment, that what the person needs to do is he needs to have the proper belief and he needs to do good deeds. Okay. This is what we're talking about. He says this was in the earlier revelations to earlier prophets. Okay, this ayah doesn't mean that this exact surah was also in the earlier revelations. No, it means that this subject of discussion, all right, the warning that was given to people that they're going to be judged based on their actions. Okay, the warning that they need to correct their beliefs, that they need to straighten out their lives, because if they don't, there's a threat of a severe torture. That has been present in the revelations given to the earlier prophets. Which prophets are we talking about? It says, Suhufu Ibrahim wa Musa. Okay, this is in reference to the 10 suhufs that were revealed to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and in reference to the Torah, which was revealed to Musa alayhi salam. Here ends the explanation of Surah Al-A'la. Any questions about this surah?
What book are you reading from?
This book is called Jawahir al-A'imma. It's written by a Shayk named Shayk Jubil Halim. He's a big Shayk in the place where I studied. It's not very famous because it was written recently. He's still alive, the author of this book. He's still alive now. This isn't one of the big tafsirs from 1,000 years ago. But he selected most of these explanations from older tafsirs or from the teachings of his Shaykh, the Hafidh al-Abdul. Yes, brother.
It's about the prayer. You have to, before you pray, or while you bring up the intention, have the number that you're going to pray, or can you change your mind while you're praying?
You do not have to intend a certain number of rak'ahs when you pray al Witr. Okay? You do not have to intend the number of rak'ahs at the time that you enter the prayer. Okay? As some of you know, when you enter a prayer, in your intention, you have to intend 3 things. You intend the act that you're doing a salat. You intend the time or the cause, like why you're doing this salat, right? So if it's Asr, then you're saying, this is the Asr prayer that I'm doing. If you're praying 2 rak'ahs because you walked into a mosque, then you're saying, I'm praying these 2 rak'ahs because I walked into the mosque. Okay, and the third thing that you intend is that if this prayer is an obligation, you have to intend that you're fulfilling the obligation. Okay, if it's not an obligation, then you don't have to intend the third thing. This is what you need to do to have a valid prayer. So when you do al-Witr, you do not have to intend any particular number of rak'ahs. Okay, but if you do, if you intend a certain number when you enter the prayer, then you have to do that number. But if you just intend if you intend to perform the optional Witr prayer and you don't intend any particular number of rak'ahs, then you just go for whatever number suits you. Okay, if you want to do at the end of the 3rd rak'ah, you think, this is enough, I want to go sit down. you can just stop after the third. Okay, if you're in the fourth rak'ah and you think, this is enough, I'm going to go sit down, you stand up and you do a fifth rak'ah, and then you go sit down. Okay, remember, witr has to be an odd number. Any other questions? Okay. Well, the other surahs that I want to talk about are shorter, so inshallah they won't take as much time. So in the third to last rak'ah, it's sunnah to recite Surah Al-A'la, which we just talked about. In the second to last rak'ah, it's sunnah to recite Surah Al-Kafirun. This surah, I'm sure almost everyone in this room has heard before. Probably most of you have it memorized. It goes as follows. A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun. This surah starts with a direct command to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It starts by saying, say. Okay, so Allah in this ayah commanded our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say a very specific statement to a very specific group of people. Who are these people? Okay, what's the situation that's going on here? What happened was, this is one of the very early surahs. It came very early, during a time when the idol worshippers of Mecca were trying to find a solution to what they considered to be the problem of Muhammad.